Hello. Welcome everybody to our very first event of Love in Lockdown. My name is Rebecca Campbell. I'll be hosting this event. So I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we're all meeting on today. We're all over the place. So I'll just acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we are all individually meeting on today and their elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of us are doing it very tough at the moment. So particularly our friends who are in Sydney, who have been locked down for a really long time, Melbourne, and now many other places as well. So I want to acknowledge that this is a hard time for a lot of people. And I'm hoping that this event series can bring people together. Hopefully we can have some fun and learn some things as well. I have a glass of wine, and I guess have a glass of wine tonight as well. If you'd like to tag us on Instagram with your a photo of what you're doing tonight, we would love to see you and what you're doing in your community. What is this event series about? So we ran a small event a few weeks ago for singles who wanted to learn more during lockdown. Sorry, I'm not doing a great job of this tonight. And so we thought, let's put together a series and bring everybody together. And so we've created this as a group of 4 events starting tonight, looking at dating. Next week, we've got an event focusing on relationships. The third week, we've got 3 couples joining us who have had success online dating, as well as Sydney's elite matchmaker. And then the 4th week, we've got an event called Come Together, where we've got a whole bunch of special guests. So this is the first of the events. And what's going to happen tonight is we have 2 guests, Dave Heysen, who is the CEO of RSVP, and Stephen Whyte, who is a behavioural psychologist, behavioural economic. I don't know what is wrong with me tonight. I'm really sorry. A behavioural economist at QUT. We are going to have lots of opportunities for you to ask questions. We have 3 guests who have volunteered to share their stories, online dating, and their challenges, and ask questions to our hosts tonight. And also you will have the opportunity to ask questions as well. So the chat is open, and we also have Q&A open. So please ask if you would like us to put a question to Dave or Stephen or myself. Please put that in the Q&A, and please upvote the questions that you would like most to be addressed. A little bit about me. I am a business person. I've started a couple of companies. The best known one is called Hey You. Most recently, I have authored a book called 138 Dates, which you might have seen, which is my story of my search for love. So I was 34 and hadn't dated in 10 years, and then set myself this challenge of going on 1 date every single week for a year. So what followed was 3 years of very intense dating, a massive amount of learning, some humiliating moments, a lot of personal growth, and then ultimately meeting my husband, Rod, who is very kindly doing our tech support tonight. So I learned a lot through that process. So I will chime in and answer questions as well with that background of experience. So first up, I'd like to introduce Stephen Whyte. So Stephen, as I mentioned before, behavioural economist at QUT, who has researched the data on RSVP and more recently has just done a major study of 7,000 Australians of different ages, looking at what is it that they look for in a long-term partner. So Stephen, can you join us? And if you can unmute yourself and turn your video on. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to start by maybe you can give us just a little background of the research that you did, and why did you choose to study this, and some initial findings.
So hi Rebecca, and hi everyone.
Hey.
Have you got my camera? Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
I think so. Rod, if you can hear, can you pull down the slide, and it should be in gallery view. So I'm not sure if the participants can see us in gallery view or if the participants can see the slide, but you might want to pull down your screen share, Rod. We'll just keep talking, Stephen. We'll try and work out the tech in the background. Here we go. We've got you. We've got you.
It's great to be here to talk to everyone. So I'm a behavioural economist. It's more than a field of science. It's a mouthful. But yeah, if you think about what economics is. Economics is the study of efficiency and price and quantity. Very, very sort of dry stuff that politicians go to economists and they ask about evaluations on decisions and policies, and that side of the choice, or search and choice, is what I was interested in. But behavioural economics is sort of a bridge between economics and psychology. So incorporating things like cognition, emotion, personality in choice. And many moons ago, when I was doing my PhD, I wanted to look at really large scale decisions. So, not minor decisions like buying a car or, choosing where to go for dinner. I wanted to look at, arguably the largest decision you can make in your lifetime, and that's choosing a mate. Choosing a mate has, emotional, financial, it can even have physiological impacts on you. And what we wanted to do was really go out and look to see how people search and how people choose. And I was lucky enough when I was doing my PhD to run into Dave and his team at RSVP, and we've done some research together, looking at how people search. What are the characteristics people search for, but even more broadly, just in relation to what cyber markets are doing, or how people are changing their preferences in relation to the internet, as opposed to more traditional means to meet people.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. We're going to come really soon to some of the findings in your research in terms of what people look for, how that changed as they age. And I also want to dig into how, what people are looking for and how that's changed since COVID. So we'll come to that in a sec. I want to introduce Dave Heysen, who is the CEO of RSVP. So Dave is the founder of Oasis, prior to RSVP, which merged in 2014, and now is CEO of the group, being RSVP and the app Helium. So Dave, I'd like to bring you on screen just to introduce yourself. And I would love to know how dating apps have changed since 2007. So what does the current landscape look like? And also I'd like to know how RSVP is different.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining tonight. It's a great event and very happy to support it from RSVP point of view. I've actually been in the online dating industry for 21 years now, which is a little bit scary. I started in early 2000 working for a site called Soulmates World, which powered MSN dating. That sold to Match.com. I went on and worked for Match.com in Australia and New Zealand, and then we sort of founded Oasis. I left that and founded Oasis. Oasis was a game changer in the industry. To your point, Rebecca, it was the first sort of free site in Australia and cut through the market very quickly. We've seen a very significant change in the last, particularly the last 6 to 8 years, mainly with the advent of Tinder and Bumble in terms of pure app dating, very sort of easy to use and very sort of brief, time on site to find a partner. In terms of photos became the kind of guide for where you go, and people were used to getting results and getting them very quickly. So that's been a big change, which has been reflected through the industry. I think the major change we've experienced as a company with RSVP in particular is been a very traditional brand. It's kind of given us a place of where we sit in the market, which is we sit in probably the more traditional online dating, people looking for good dates. They want to have a second date, looking for relationships and looking for, a lifelong partner. And look, we've certainly, I think the biggest factor I see in the industry that's changed is, from our perspective, we feel like people have changed from looking for positives in people to looking for negatives. So
what do you mean by that?
So if you think about Tinder and you think about the amount of people on it, that a profile appears to you and you're actually looking for what's wrong with it to go on to the next person, which is very different to what online dating traditionally started with. So people are actually going, oh, sorry, that person does this or does that. I'm on to the next person, because they know there's more volume there. There's people coming behind them. And I guess that's kind of separated the market in terms of what we'd probably refer to as sort of shallow dating versus, serious dating. And we've, through Stephen's research as well, in the last 4 years, we've tried to adapt our RSVP platform to I guess, combat that, but also provide a differential service for that sort of niche part of the market.
Cool. So I'd like to talk to both of you about what have you found in terms of what people search for in online profiles? And I know it is different on RSVP as opposed to when you're just looking at a photo, but where you can look for attributes, what kind of attributes are people looking for? And I know, Stephen, you looked at how this changes as a person ages.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the research sort of points towards that what people find attractive in a mate hasn't necessarily changed with the advent of the internet or online dating. You know, what we found attractive, or, you know, that males and females placed priority on attractiveness 50 years ago, they still place the same level of priority. But the way, I think Dave pointed out, really interesting, the way that people search is changing. You know, historically, dating or courting was sequential. So you would go, there's only a limited amount of places that you could meet someone, a limited amount of ways that you could meet someone. And if I could use like a bar example, if you went to a bar, you would meet someone, have an interaction with them, and you would have to sequentially choose there and then whether or not you continued to pursue that person. You couldn't say to that person, oh, hey, can you just wait here for a couple of hours? And if I find someone better, I'll come back. You'd probably get a drink thrown in your face. Where the internet is very different now, you know, and it's what scientists call non-sequential choice. And Dave was talking about this, you know, voluminous overload of choice, and it sort of, you know, numbs us a little bit. So maybe we don't prioritize the cues that historically we thought we did, and we didn't pick up on those sorts of things. But in relation to what people find attractive or what is attractive to individuals, that's still the same. It's just different for different sexes at different ages. So
what kind of things people are looking for at different ages? What are the kind of the key things that you're finding people searching for?
A lot of the social psychology literature and the evolutionary psychology literature points towards, you know, cues of fertility in 18 to 30-year-olds. And if you think about, well, what is, I mean, you know, it's evolutionary science. So at the end of the day, the game is to reproduce and pass on your genes. It stands to reason then that, you know, those cues and or proxies for fertility would be more important. But if you think, you know, in older populations where more highly educated or reach the peak of their education, reach the peak of their income earnings, don't have dependent offspring, for them, their priorities in relation to what they find sexually attractive or attractive in a mate in a relationship are very, very different. And you see that, or a lot of our research points towards priority for personality or emotive or trust characteristics in mates for populations above 45.
And so just for those watching, how would you signal, I don't know, Dave, if you could answer this question, but things like trust and the things that people might be looking for more if they are over 45 or if they are looking for a long-term partner who is looking for those kind of signals, what are you seeing on the side in terms of how people can show that?
Yeah, look, I think that
education.
Education's a big one, and people are very specific about what they want. I really think that we're trying to, at RSVPs, kind of, I guess, dilute the deal breakers in terms of, you know, there must be so many stories out there in the last 15 years where someone is absolutely spot on, perfect for someone, but the fact that they're 1 centimetre shorter than they specified, they'll never meet because of the way online dating's set up. So what we're trying to do at RSVP is bring in things that we feel matter more, and it's actually, you know, on the back of Stephen's study is, you know, interest is a very, very important factor, because particularly during this COVID time, you know, you want common ground, you want things to talk about. So, you know, is the fact you like bike riding or surfing more important than the fact you've got blonde hair, blue eyes, and you're 1.68 meters? And I think we're trying to really emphasize that. And the study shows that, Stephen will probably talk to this a bit better than myself, but the study shows that people come in with an ideal partner of what they want, and they actually end up meeting exactly the opposite of that or some derivative of that. So I think that's the change, is that people are learning online to spread their kind of searching criteria to meet people. And COVID's been a great sort of, I guess, catalyst to that, in terms of really people know they're just going to be online. So it's not a matter of I'm going to make a decision whether I want to have a coffee or a restaurant dinner with you based on your photos, because they've got more time to actually get to know someone and get in depth with them before they meet them, which I think has been a great thing for the industry.
So what have you seen, Dave, just in terms of what has changed since COVID, in terms of what people are looking for, but also in terms of the way people are behaving on the site? And are people, since lockdown, less going on to online dating sites, less or more?
Oh, look, we've definitely seen an increase in activity. We've seen an increase in session time. People have got more time. We're hoping we're, I guess, influencing people to look outside their criteria. We've recently joined our Discover and Matches together. So Matches is based on exactly your seeking criteria, and Discover is people, our engine looks at behavioural traits of people and sends that to you to say, hey, why don't you give this person a go because we think they're going to be right. So it's breaking down that negativity from your Tinder and Bumbles into branching out into, hey, you've got more time. Why don't you just get in some conversations and learn more about these people, because personality is probably going to become a lot stronger than physicality in terms of the COVID situation.
I guess if you're spending a lot more time talking to people online, maybe meeting on Zoom, you're going to get to know people's personalities more than you're going to notice.
Yeah, look, I think people still have a bit of a thing about Zoom and video dating because it's, it's certainly got some connotations attached to it, but it is becoming more common play. But just that kind of, we sort of picture it as we get out of lockdown and people, when they physically meet, they're actually going to know a lot more about someone than they would have, a year and a half ago, because it was a bit quicker in terms of that interaction due to the COVID lockdown.
Cool, thank you. So one thing I wanted to ask Stephen just before we bring on our guests is we talked a little the other day when we spoke about the pair bonding research. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about, people find each other online and then they meet maybe they meet for a first date, maybe they meet on Zoom at the moment. But, what is it that makes a bond, an initial bond when two people meet? Because I know that you had talked about some research that you had done or had seen in the space.
Yeah, so there's a whole field of social psychology literature that looks at what's known as mate retention. It's not the sexiest title, but searching for a partner and searching for a mate is very, very different. It's a very, very different task than to engaging a mate and retaining and staying in a relationship. So we sort of focus a bit differently. If you think about, it's a difference between going out and buying a product, a good or a service, and then coming home and using it. They're two very different things. So it stands to reason then that some of the behaviours and the traits that you would exhibit in, or people may be good at one, they may not be good at the other, or they may be very good at the latter, but may not be the best at engaging or getting out there to meet. So, it's important to think about the two, they're very different behaviours. Staying in a relationship is arguably probably just as hard as finding a mate.
For sure. I'll just my experience briefly that I wrote about in my journey was when I started my online dating journey, I made a list of what I was looking for. And I remember it was smart, tall, and fun. And then as I started dating and meeting people, I would find, different things. I remember I met someone who told me he only dated blondes and he never dates women over 35. And I just thought that was so superficial. Yeah. And then I realized actually that me having tall as a criteria is exactly the same thing. So I removed that and then met, smart and fun, and realized that other things like being nice and caring were very important. And I just want to share with the audience some research that I did at the end of the journey, which was, I looked into what were the three attributes that make three personality attributes that make someone most likely to have a successful long-term relationships. And they were reliability. So, someone who is like steady Neddy was the words that I found in the research. Someone who shows up as agreeableness. So someone who is, willing to compromise. And the third one was a positive emotion. So someone who is like not overly negative, but is generally positive. So they were kind of the three things that it turned out at the end that you should look for, as opposed to smart, tall, and fun, if you want to have a successful long-term relationship. Anyway, I would love to invite our first guest on. So 3 members of the community have very bravely and generously offered to come on and share some of their stories online dating, and put some questions to the panelists as well. So Jenny, I'll ask you to join first. So Jenny is joining us from Melbourne.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Jenny. Can you just tell us, you've been online dating for a little while. Can you share a little about your experience? And then you had a question of where you might be going wrong.
Oh, so many questions. Okay. In a nutshell, I've been dating for about off and on 7 years. I've met some amazing people, but not the right one. Everything's got to come together. But I'm finding, particularly more now, I can't meet anyone. I just can't find them. So I don't know whether I'm not looking for the right people or they're just not there. I don't know.
So just to clarify, what do you mean you can't meet? Do you mean meet in person or?
Yeah, no. I can't actually find them. I can't find people who are ticking enough of my boxes to actually want to pursue anymore. I might have a chat with a person. We'll chat backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times, and then think I'm either so bored that I don't want to go on with this, or there's just not enough there. What looked good in the initial profile just isn't there, and I sort of think, there's nothing there. Whereas I think in the past I was finding it a little bit easier. I don't know. So maybe I have closed my criteria and I'm blocking out too many people. I don't know. I'm certainly looking at people that I wasn't looking at, 7 years ago. And I think I come from a past where I never dated as a teenager. I married my childhood sweetheart, so I'd never dated anyone else. So going into the dating scene in my 40s was a little scary. So I think what I learnt then is very different to what I'm doing now. But and just using RSVP, I'm sort of finding, I think I mentioned to you, Rebecca, that I find that if I put my picture up, my profile picture up, I just get bombarded with all these really inappropriate people who haven't obviously read what I've put in my profile, haven't read what my search criteria are, and they're so far out. Like, I won't date a smoker, and I get 30 smokers contacting me, and I think that's never going to work. And so, but when I took my picture away and just left the silhouette, but the photos are still there, so people can still see them. But I took my photo away and people actually had to read my profile. It cut down hugely on who would actually contact me.
So your question is not enough options, not enough people that are kind of willing to go to the next stage to meet, that are the right types of people. Dave, Stephen, do you have any follow-up questions, or do you have any ideas?
I think just from the start, Dave brought it up too. We did a study with RSVP looking at what people state is their preference versus, we had 9 or 10 characteristics, and then match them against the characteristics of the individuals that they were contacting. And we found only about 10 or 15% of the characteristics that you state you want in a partner end up being those of the person that you contact. And I think that's sort of, Rebecca, you were talking to it earlier, is what your preconceived idea about what your ideal match is starts out as X, Ken or Barbie, or they're just examples. But as you go through that search process, and it is a process, it's a cost to you, it's a constraint. I don't want to be negative about it, but you invest your time and your emotions. It changes the way that you rank or your preference set. So I'm not surprised that Jenny, what you're looking for has changed, or that it's not that you've run out of options. And the other thing too is in relation.
Oh, well, I've changed too, so I freely acknowledge that. Freely acknowledge that. I've grown.
that's a good thing. I mean, like in all sort of, you know, I don't want to use the word journey, but I mean, in all sorts of journeys and, you know, search processes, you're going to evolve yourself in how you, you know, attack the problem or, you know, search. In relation to males contacting females, that's completely normal. And it's across all dating websites. You tend to see about 4 or 5 contacts of males to females for every 1 contact of female to male. So, and again, you know, that goes back to, you know, evolutionary arguments or, you know, historical, you know, gender norms around men making contact. In relation to you taking your profile photo down, I think that's a great idea, you know, to filter out.
It made life easier.
You've learned that process to do that. So, yeah, so I'll let Dave talk, sorry.
No, I mean, I think you've summed up well. It's a really interesting one because, Jenny, you've obviously got really strong deal breakers. And I think this is my advice to people who do have strong deal breakers. You've got to be very careful how they come across in your profile or get interpreted. So all you want to put at the top of your profile is smokers don't bother, right? and that's how you feel. But for someone reading that, they might say, oh, she's a bit aggressive or she's very opinionated. So it's very important you can get that in your profile and it's very important to you, but you've got to make sure that you're not actually just culling people straight away because of you feel so strongly about it. And they don't know your history. They don't know that you've been contacted by 30 smokers and that's annoyed you. But you think about the next person of what it is. And I think this is this is a really key point with deal breakers is what is an actual deal breaker? And this is what Stephen was talking about, and what's not. So that's what I referred to before as a centimetre shorter than you want, as opposed to smoking. They're completely different deal breakers in my eyes of what it is. And I think you've got to be really careful how you actually portray yourself of feeling about those 2 options. And, you know, I think it's interesting. My daughter is doing home learning at the moment, and she's doing English paragraphs in her sort of literature. And the teacher keeps saying, have a sizzling opener, right? And it's really interesting because the sizzling opener in a dating profile is don't turn people off and don't be too full on. So your sizzling opener, what do people want? They want fun. They want, you know, relatable content. So I think that's where people need to, and look, we're at fault as dating sites for guiding people down that pathway. What do you want? What don't you want? Very sort of clear cut, but that's not how people want to interpret it. You want to open up the conversation, particularly in COVID, because you're not going to be forced to meet them straight away. You want to open up the conversation and decide on yourself. So if a smoker does contact you, done. You know, you can just politely say, I'm rejecting you. I don't date smokers. If a guy who's 1 centimetre too short contacts you, why not get to know him? Why cut him out initially type thing? So that'd be my kind of take on it, I think.
Do you mind if I ask another follow-up question?
Sure.
The other question I have is, at a 100% fail rate, when I send a link to a guy and, you know, buy a stamp and contact them, they either disappear immediately or we have one conversation, you know, hi, I'm Jenny, I like whatever, and then they vanish. Whereas if they contact me, we can actually progress. And I've met some really nice guys on this site. You know, we're still friends. It just didn't work out to anymore. What's going on there? I just don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, look, I think there's still a lot of traditionalists out there who feel a little bit intimidated by women making the first move. I don't think it should be the case.
Okay.
And, you know, I think it's kind of a bit of an ego thing as well. Stephen's probably got a comment on that as well, but.
No, I just I think you know we could look to cultural norms for sure, but even more than that, just think about the numbers. You know, if it is 4 out of or 5 contacts for each male to female, where 1 is the other way, there's just not a lot of that behaviour. Not that it's the wrong behaviour. It's just, and like Dave's saying, if you have a percentage of the population that don't engage that way or want to operate a different way, I wouldn't see it as, don't stop you. Don't let it stop you from continuing to contact people you're interested in. That you're signalling to the market your intention. You should always continue to do that.
And I'll share with you my process, Jenny. So I started similar to you, where I got lots and lots of bombardments from guys contacting me, and none of them seemed right. And sometimes there's too many to even go through. So I actually blocked my profile. I don't know if you can still do this, but I only would contact people who I would only talk to people who I contacted first. And then I would always contact people first. I would go through lots of profiles. I would contact lots and lots of people. And some people wouldn't come back to me. And you know what? I just thought, well, if they don't like to have the women make the first move, they're probably not going to be a good match for me. That was just me personally. And for what I might have lost in people not contacting me back because I'd made the first move, I made up for in volume, which is that I just contacted so many people that there was a good number that came back to me, and I always had like a good pipeline coming through of potential candidates that I was talking to.
Yeah, I just found it weird that, you'll send a wink, they send a positive response, and you think, yeah, okay, you get a stamp, have a conversation, and it's gone. You think, hang on, we didn't even get past names, really. Why were they positive if they weren't feeling that? Just say, I'm not interested at the moment or whatever. But it confuses me.
I mean, look, I think to some extent it's a numbers game, right? You'll get people who aren't really serious about online dating. Maybe they're kind of on there, but they're not really even looking for someone at the moment, or who knows? I think you've got to be willing. Well, I mean, in my case, I had to be willing to contact a lot of people and I had multiple conversations going at once. And then if someone dropped out, I wouldn't even notice after a while. Early on, when I was only talking to one or two people, if someone dropped out, I'd be like, oh, what happened to them? But after you have a good number going, you don't even really notice when they disappear. But not so many that you can't keep up. And then when you get to a point when you actually start talking to people, that's when you'll find someone who stands out, and then there'll be some magic that happens.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thanks for being brave and coming on. We really appreciate it. I want to bring on Catherine, who is joining us from Hobart. So Catherine has very bravely offered to share her online dating profile and get some feedback. So first I'm going to ask Catherine, you are new to online dating. Can you just tell us a little of your story and how you found it so far?
Relatively new. You can hear me okay?
Yes, great.
Yeah. Maybe a year. I'm not sure exactly. And I've only had maybe 4 dates as a result of the online dating. I find the time investment sometimes difficult. I really just want to get, and we've had the privilege in Hobart of having very little lockdown. I find it much easier to meet somebody and get an idea there than explore by back and forward messages. I find it's a lot of time and not very predictive of how I've had some great interaction and then met the person, and then it's obviously a no. I could relate to a lot of what Jenny said early on of just feeling like some contact from people is quite inappropriate. The people that haven't made any effort in their profile, or are 25 years older, or clearly there are not any links. I mean, I feel a bit out of my depth and experience in the whole process, but yeah.
So you had some specific questions about your profile. We're just going to bring your profile up. We're going to share, Dave's going to share screen here, which you've sent to us. So thank you for that. And you wanted some feedback on the profile, on your profile itself, right?
Yes, please. Yes.
Is that coming up okay, Rebecca?
So yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So tell us what it is that you're looking for, and maybe what you're finding, and what you think might, what do you think of your profile, and what are your concerns?
So it's actually been a little while, because I've been seeing somebody on the site who I like very much as a friend, but I don't know that it's going to work out romantically. Well, my questions, I don't know how much to share in a profile and how, like, I feel like I'm very open as a person. I don't know if it's clear enough as in terms of what I'm looking for. And I just don't really have any other profiles to compare to female profiles. I've, seen men's ones. Sometimes men put a lot of effort in, and sometimes, there's just the line, I'm still working, you can get in touch, I'm still working on my profile. Yeah. Whether it's too serious. Like I've tried not to, I think it was Dave saying before about not having, absolutes of what you don't want. I've tried not to do that. And I think I know that, it's a bit unpredictable who you actually end up with in terms of, whether they're a centimetre shorter or whether, what their different characteristics are. So I don't have a lot of definites. I've got general ideas of what qualities are important to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Dave and Stephen, can you see anything in Catherine's profile that you would recommend even just thinking about?
Dave, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Look, this is not my area of expertise. First of all, I'm just going on what experience I've seen over 20 years. It's quite a long time, but firstly, I think your profile's great. You're very honest, which I think is absolute key to a profile. My take on it would be, if we look at the photos are very important as a backup and I guess a complement to what you've written. You've got 3 photos that are portrait photos. So I would use your gallery to actually show what else you do in life, like active, like it doesn't actually have to be of you. It might be of your favorite city, or it might be spending time with family, whatever it might be, a great dish at a restaurant, whatever your passions are, which actually physically enhances sort of people's look at your profile in terms of, oh, well, Catherine does this, 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 and this, and there's a start type thing. I think the one thing that people find tricky on dating sites is, particularly RSVP, the what you want and matching criteria in terms of deal breakers and in terms of wants is kind of taken care of in the background with your matches. So you don't really need to spend time actually expressing that, because it's very important. And it goes back to my point about, you want to come through as a strong person, but you also don't want to eliminate people initially. So my advice was your first line of your profile. I personally think it's a bit strong.
Yeah, okay.
So that's just my opinion, but it's why does someone want to hang out with you? What's cool about you? Because that's for me the starting point in terms of, do you like a good meal? Do you like a glass of wine? Do you like exercising? Do you like traveling? And then it's more about going into, you can subtly express your no-nos in a profile, if that makes sense. So that would just be my take on it. But I think you've written beautifully. I think it's, I think one thing people will take from your profile is you're actually serious about meeting someone genuine, and you've put a lot of effort into it. So I think it's fantastic. But that would just be my advice.
So just for those who can't see the first line, it says self-aware woman seeks self-aware man. So a bunch of people on the chat so they haven't been able to read it. So like maybe that, talk about something that you enjoy doing, something that you're passionate about in an opening line.
I think so, Rebecca. I think that's probably what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, my advice would almost be be yourself, and eventually you'll find someone who's looking for exactly that. And I'm big on, it's a numbers game, obviously, that you'll find that person if you look hard enough. But I do think, that's some good advice in there about how you present yourself and what you're passionate about. And I do think in photos, it's great to show what you're interested in, and you're doing something as well. Like, yeah, if you're interested in outdoors or in plants or anything, that's a great way to express that is through photos. Stephen, you've studied 7,000 dating profiles.
Yeah. Super brave, Catherine. Well done for putting the profile forward. And any of the information I'm going to give you is from the science. It's not criticism in any way, but I think, Dave touched on it. Information is really pivotal. You want people to be spending time looking at your profile. To me, the name there, it took me a little while to work out what that is. Take me as I am. Anything that sort of stops people or hinders people from understanding you quickly, because people they have this choice overload. They are flicking through things. Anything that hinders people to engage you, it will reduce the pool of people that are contacting you. In relation to your image, and Dave touched on your portraits, there's no doubt in the research literature that men prefer or favour attractiveness in females, and there's ways that you can shape your images and your photos. For the majority of all populations, symmetry in photos, people rate symmetry more attractive. So your profile picture there is symmetrical, and so you're technically, in an experimental sense, you're going to get more people rating your attractiveness higher compared to if you have your head tilted. The other one is taking images from above your face as opposed to below it. Photos from above, people tend to rate that those photos are more attractive. The last one I wanted to talk with you about was, and again, sort of Dave's talking about deal breakers. When I look at your, you've got a 50K radius, and you're super highly educated. You've got postgrad qualifications. So in relation to that, again, what a lot of the literature shows is that men prefer women of the same education level or lower. So you're in a unique market, and that's not a bad thing, but that's at a population level how the research shows men behave. When I looked at your, you wanted someone within a 50K radius, and then because I'm an economist, I went to the 2016 census data for Hobart, and I looked up. Hobart has 50,439 people. And 4,603 of them have postgraduate qualifications. And then if we think, well, maybe 50% of the population is male, so you're down to 2,300, and you're in the 45 to 49 bracket, which is about 6.5% of the population. So now men that meet your criteria is only about 155 men. And now that's not including, let's say, half of them or 3/4 of them in that age bracket are already married. So now we're down to about 40 blokes, and some of them are going to want to be willingly single. Some are going to be gay. So your population, and lots of those blokes, they're not going to be on RSVP either. So your population of men that your ideal, your deal breaker of 50K is probably single digit. Yeah, I know, it's probably single digit. You probably met them, you probably run into them at the local Coles, I mean, I think in consideration for you, there's lots of things that you can do to control the population, how the male population view you. But this is a way that you could maybe signal to a broader population. I mean, at the end of the day, what's 50Ks to 75Ks? And we're in lockdown now for, lots of us are going to be in lockdown for a really long time. So it's probably in your best interest to maybe broaden out. I've never been to Tassie, but I don't know how far, what's the distance between Hobart and Launceston? Maybe branch out to the whole of the Apple Isle for a while and just see if you get, more contacts and more initiations. Yeah.
You have any response, Catherine?
Oh no, I'm just laughing. I'm thinking my last relationship was with someone in Amsterdam, so I think that's how broad.
Other side of the planet.
Yeah.
I think your profile is great. I hope I can help. I mean, a lot of the stuff, around information and transparency and deal breakers. Dave's saying it as well. It's about freeing up your profile to have as much engagement and make it not aesthetically attractive, but as attractive as it can to the people you're trying to get to read the information in your profile. Dave said it at the start, you know, RSVP is a traditional online dating conduit. You know, there's lots and lots of information. It's a population of people that are looking for more information, and you're trying to, in your profile, give a lot of information, but make it easy for people to absorb it.
Yeah.
I think it also comes back to that point, Stephen, about the people have been trained in the last 8 to 10 years to look for negativity.
Sure.
So you've got to think about when you're presenting yourself to rule out that negativity, in terms of, yes, be yourself, but don't be yourself too much, if that makes sense. It's just, you're trying to get people interested. You're not trying to tell people who you don't want. I think that's
that makes sense. Don't tell people who you don't want.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say in my dating experience, early on, I tried to change myself to more think, well, what is it that this person wants to hear? And should I talk down my work because it would be intimidating? And in the end, you know, that it just never worked. You've got to be yourself. I think particularly when you date, and just believe you will find someone, so long as you're willing to put yourself out there, and if you can track down all those 10 people, one of them might work out, but you need to actually put the work in to meet those 10 people. But I think, there will be someone out there looking for exactly you if you're willing to put the work in. But I think that's some very solid advice on how you present yourself in your profile.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for being so brave.
Thank you.
Catherine. Thank you.
We're going to bring on Robert for your question. We are running short on time, and I want to get some questions from the audience. But Robert, you have a question. You want to put your question to the...
That's all right. I just had to find the mute button. I'm over 60, as you can tell by my not knowing where the mute button is. And I only just started dating. I've had, my lifetime's been involved, my adult life has been with 2 marriages, 2 long-term marriages. And I found myself single about 18 months ago. And so I've been thinking about, I go to social clubs and meet people. A lot of single females my age are happily single. And they're great to talk to and go out with, but there's nothing going to develop from that. And so I thought, and particularly in lockdown, when you can't go out and meet others, online was the go. So online I went. So probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I joined RSVP. And I'm just a little bit confused with, and I'm lucky, I think, because I've actually had women wink me, which from what I'm hearing here is a bit unusual. So I'm a little bit embarrassed by that, I suppose. But
your question was
go on.
Around talking to more than one person at once.
Yeah. My concern is that do I have a conversation with more than one at a time? My concern with that is, I run the risk of mixing them up, mentioning Betty instead of Sue, or mentioning that you've got 2 children, you've only got 1. And even if I don't do that, end of the day, hopefully I'll find somebody, and then I've got to tell the other 1 or 2 or 3, sorry, I've got somebody else. No, I don't like upsetting people. So is it normal to, and I know what normal means, is it usual to have 1 conversation at a time, or to have 3 or 4 and see where each of them go?
Dave, do you want to answer that question? What do you see as normal on the site?
Oh, look, I think you've got to be talking to, as many people as you feel comfortable with. I wouldn't narrow it down to 1 and put all your eggs in that basket. I think this is an experience of trying to, I guess, spread your wings, and conversations can go different ways. So I think, Robert, the trick is to actually keep track of the conversations you're having with each person, because calling someone the wrong name is the same as doing it in person. So I think, even if you keep notes and, make sure you're really keeping track of the interests and conversations you've been having with particular individuals. I think that's key here. So I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself to 1 and hope that goes well. I think online dating is about meeting people to, it's a numbers game.
Yeah. People fully expect if you meet someone else and, it starts going well, to go back to the others and say, oh, I've thank you. It was really nice connecting with you. I've met someone. Best of luck in your search. That is extremely common. And I don't think you should feel at all bad about doing that. I mean, that is actually a very nice way of doing it as opposed to just disappearing, which is what a lot of people do. But it is expected, I think, that you'll be talking to more than one person.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of managing the conversations, I mean, my process was when I had to go on one date every week for a year, I worked out pretty quickly that I wanted to kind of maximize my chances in each of those dates. So of having the right person. So I wanted to get the very best person to date each week. And so I would have lots of candidates kind of coming in the top of the funnel, having lots of conversations going at the same time. I set up screening calls and I always did them, this is formulaic, but I always did them on Sunday afternoons. So I set up kind of 3 to 5 phone calls on a Sunday afternoon, and then usually I would date 1 or 2 of them. So maybe that's a Zoom date now, but and when I did those calls, I actually did keep a spreadsheet just of stories so that I would remember, like, and on the date, I could look back at the sheet and go, okay, that was the guy that had the sister in Adelaide. I didn't ask somebody about the sister in Adelaide. That was actually someone else I'd spoken to on the call. So that was how I managed it. And, it was a good process. Obviously, what happens at the end when you connect, that's magic. But I think, it's a good way of kind of managing getting as many lottery tickets as you can.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much, Robert. I want to go to some questions from the audience. And there's some great questions that have come through. If you want to keep them coming through, that's awesome. So I'm just going to do rapid fire questions so that we get through as many of them as possible. So Sylvia has asked, what questions to ask when chatting online to set yourself apart from the usual questions? I think that is a real challenge, knowing what to say early on in those online conversations. Have you seen anything, Dave or Steve, that you think are good early questions?
I think
you go, Steve.
I think Robert touched on it. Make sure you get the name right. That's probably the first and most important thing. But again, the contacts that you're making, again, you're transitioning from this search and this initial contact. It's going to be a bridge to get over. So, I mean, are you wanting to really differentiate yourself at that point? This person's already interested in you. They've contacted you and they're having a conversation. I think probably the best thing is to this is an opportunity, like Dave was saying. Don't oversell yourself in your profile or the things that you don't like, but that's the time to start engaging and putting forward who you are and the information that you want to ascertain from another person as well.
Cool. Dave, have you seen anything in terms of questions at work?
I mean, I think this is the hardest part of online dating, is the opener, the icebreaker. Yeah. And it's just as hard as walking up to someone at a bar. So I think that we're actually experimenting at the moment with providing those icebreakers for people to get them to talk about something in common to kind of fulfill that initial awkwardness, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it might be, how do you feel about vaccinations? Or what do you think about Afghanistan at the moment? Or a topical thing where you can actually both put your point of view forward, and that's your kind of icebreaker to move forward. Because everyone wants to be witty, everyone wants to do this, but it's such a hard thing. But Stephen's right, just ease yourself into it, and don't be too confident. I guess. Yeah.
There's a question, Dave, around online scams, and I think people are afraid of online dating scams. Now, either of meeting someone who they meet in person and they're dangerous, or they meet someone online and then they get scammed. So I just want to know, from your perspective, you've been in this game a long time. What do you see in terms of those scammers, all those kind of dangerous people coming through your support channels? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And what can people do to protect themselves?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Rebecca. And, I think one of the things, just to talk about RSVP, we have Australian support here in Sydney that are well aware of what goes on out there globally. We're here for you to talk to. I guess just tread with caution, and if it's too good to be true, it often is. I think technology's come a really long way in terms of patterns, and we have a very, very sophisticated back end that is looking at scammers, where they join from, even down to patterns of their writing and text. But there's some really, really basic principles that if you follow, it's you're going to be fine. And that's, if someone's asking you for money, then something's wrong. If someone asks you to jump off the site, that's another massive one, because we have the technology there to actually provide protection to you. And if there's any doubt whatsoever, you just need to contact us initially. So we work pretty closely with the ACCC. We are offering advice on the site as well. It's certainly, I can say in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been, we've had no issues with it on RSVP.
Okay, so no online scams in the past 4 or 5 years.
No, it's just
not like it's happening all the time.
No, it's the technology's too good these days, but tread cautiously. You got to put this in perspective. Tread as cautiously as you would meeting someone at the pub who says they're a doctor and they're not. It's the same. It's exactly the same thing. So, I think the great thing about online is you've actually got a support network to help you out, and you've also got information. So. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I've got a question from Deirdre, who emailed me today as well, who wanted me to raise with you, Dave, that a lot of men aren't filling out their profiles properly. And just maybe they mention interests and don't write anything of substance, compared to maybe that on average women might spend a bit more time on their profiles. What can you do about this? And
I think that, this is probably a result of the industry in terms of everything is more mobile now. So people have got smaller space, they want quicker results. And you've got to think about the apps that are very popular, that people want instantaneous results. So they're basically just filling out the minimal and seeing what's out there type thing. I think this comes back to, we're trying to encourage people to put information down, but at the same time, you don't want to have too much information there. You actually want to just keep yourself a little bit mysterious in terms of what you're trying to do is get into a conversation, which is a safe conversation online, and learn more about each other that way and how you respond to answers and questions. So it's a kind of, you've got to fit somewhere in between, I think.
Yeah. And a differentiator for RSVP as opposed to those other apps is that you can learn more about each other. And that is
absolutely,
tends to attract people who are looking for a more emotional, long-term relationship. So I guess the message to men, if you're out there watching, and you haven't filled in your profile, is that it is important for women to be able to read a bit about you and what you find interesting and what your passions are.
And use Google's spell check as well. So
it's a very good tip. So someone's asking around advice people with a disability. When do you mention it?
Oh, very good question. Look, we encourage people to be completely upfront. That there's, I feel RSVP's an adaptive environment for, all walks of life, I guess. And my position on that is just to be completely honest and upfront about it. And, hopefully you meet people who, I guess sort of in a similar situation, or they appreciate the honesty. So, yeah.
A question from Sarah, which is for me actually. How many people did you date at once so you didn't notice when guys dropped off? I would just say in terms of my dating funnel, and I really did look at it like a sales funnel, I probably had 10 to 20 conversations going at any one time. And then a lot of them would drop off, and I would suggest phone calls. And that also was another screen, because a lot of people don't want to talk on the phone, and they would drop off at that point, which was totally fine with me because I was looking for an emotional long-term relationship. And I figured if someone else is looking for an emotional long-term relationship and they're serious, then they're going to be willing to talk on the phone. And if that was quite a good filter just in itself, as well as the phone call. And then I'll do 3 to 5 phone calls usually on a Sunday, and then go on 1 or 2 dates during the week. But I would say towards the end of my 138 dates in year 3, I sped that process up a bit. Yes. So, question from Caroline to do with photos. This is one for you, Stephen. Is it true that men like red?
Yes, it is true. So a lot of the research shows that, or I can give you some examples. You know, there's been experimental research in tipping in the US, using women with red lipstick or more red or more blush in their face receive higher tips. And why is that? I mean, the argument they put forward is, again, evolutionary psychology, and that red in the face is a signal of fertility cues. I don't know whether or not, again, it's like, you know, these tips around the way that you face the camera, or whether you wear red lipstick. It doesn't mean that you're, you know, putting on the red lipstick is going to make you more attractive. But, you know, relative comparisons, it definitely shows men do have a preference for red.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of questions through about COVID and how COVID is changing online dating. So I'm just curious, Dave, you know, what have you seen in terms of, we talked about how people are talking to each other for longer now before they, I guess, you know, now talk on the phone or maybe talk on Zoom. Last time, you know, last lockdown, you were able to meet for a walk, and that seems like people were doing walking dates. What have you heard people are doing this time? And how do you think also COVID has changed dating forever, you know, going forward?
Yeah, great question. And I think the Love Buddy is an interesting concept by the government, to choose one person. Hopefully you meet them on RSVP. But look, I think there's been a shift from physical to emotional attributes in people. So people are looking at more of a personality trait because they've got more time. They're getting to know people a lot better. We've seen an increase in people's activity online, as we said before. And yeah, I think in terms of dating, like the rule of going out to dinner has been thrown out the window, hasn't it? It's do something active that you can get away with in lockdown that you're allowed to do type thing. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the main differences we've seen.
Thank you. I've got so many great questions coming through. Stephen, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but it's a numbers question. How many dates does it take on average to find the right partner based on stats? Do you have any stats on that?
No, I don't. That's actually super interesting. That would be, that's going in my book for the next study. Yeah. I don't know how many on average, no. But like I said before, you know, men on average contact or send out a lot more contacts compared to women. So, you know, the two populations, the sex differences will be extremely different.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I mean, my experience was 138, but I reckon I could have chopped a lot of that down had I learned some of this stuff beforehand, because I was starting with a very low knowledge base. I'm just scrolling through the questions. There's a lot of questions here around relationships and how relationships form. So we're going to talk about that in the next session. So our next session is called Psychology of Relationships. We've got another academic this next time from the University of Wales, who is a relationship, who studies relationships as well as dating. And we also have a Sydney psychologist who is the therapist that I went to while I was on my 138 date journey, called Ruth. So she is joining us to give you some of the advice that she gave me during my journey. So we'll talk about dating, but we'll also talk about relationships. There was one last question that I wanted to put to you, Dave, because I thought it was a really cool question. And I'm now scrolling through. Here it is from Jay. Dave, what is the most inspiring thing for you being CEO of RSVP? He says, it's a niche industry and I'm very curious. So tell us about your job as CEO of RSVP. It sounds like a really cool job, but what is it that you love about it?
Look, I think it's a great question, and you know, I love what I do. I think what I find hard about it is it's actually a contrast to business, because we're actually trying to get people off the site from being successful. So, you know, a lot of businesses will try and keep people on the site for as long as they can, but we want them to stay on our site, meet someone good and get off and never come back, because that's our success rating. So it's a really different sort of mindset we go into. Oh, look, I just think the fact we're providing a service that's making people happy. And I go back to a story of years ago when a guy met a girl in Perth. He was from Melbourne on one of our sites. And she actually had a heart transplant. Love heart, or the story. And he actually met her online and flew over there and was there when she woke up from her heart transplant, and they kind of took a relationship on from there. So there's a lot of the kind of warm, fuzzy side. And then I guess for me, you know, people generally, if you don't meet someone in your work situation, which right now is horrible to meet someone because no one's at work, your family situation, or your social group, which is isolated again now. I mean, online dating just provides a lot more scope for you to meet someone. And I think that's a very, very satisfying thing for us.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much to our guests, Jenny and Catherine and Robert. And thank you for all the questions. We've got 31 questions in the Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of them and pick out the ones that we haven't addressed tonight, but that are important. And we will come to them in the session next week. So I'll email you all a link tomorrow to sign up for next week. It's similar format, same time, free. Yeah, we really want to grow this community over the next 4 weeks. So we know that there's a lot of people out there doing it tough at the moment, and hopefully we can make these events fun and insightful. We're also recording them, so we will email you a link to the recording as well. So thanks again to everyone. I hope you stay safe this week, and we'd love to see you all again next week. Thank you very much to RSVP for all your support in putting this together as well, and for supporting the community this time as well. Thanks.
Thanks.